Can you differentiate between the different types of password attacks? If not, that conversation is coming up next.
You're watching IT Pro TV.
Welcome back to Security Plus here at IT Pro TV, and today we are talking password attacks. A lot of good times had by all when it comes to those. Wes, you're going to kind of walk us down this yellow brick road of different types of password attacks. It seems straightforward, but there is some differences, some subtleties in there. Why don't you go ahead and get us kicked off on what the heck we're even talking about?
Most definitely. So when we talk about password attacks, what we're essentially talking about is, well, it's essentially used against authentication systems, right? Think about it, right? When you log into any kind of system, login interface, web application, desktop, terminal, maybe you're working with a Linux machine. What do? You type in your username and password, and you're granted access. Well, if you are an authorized user on that system, you gain access and you get the privileges associated with your account. All right. Well, attackers also want to gain that access and hopefully privileged access, especially if they can get an admin account against that system that they're trying to attack.
I know I like it.
Absolutely. I know you do. All right. But I want you to think about how difficult it would be if you had to manually guess a password. Now I'll come back to the manual part, what I mean by that, right? But let's think about it. All right, so I'm sitting here and I'm thinking like, I wonder what Dan's password might be. So I start doing a little profile and I'm thinking, well, I know he likes guitars. I know he likes knives. Let's go ahead and see. Maybe his password's gonna be ZT123456. Now it's not that, obviously. He's a lot smarter than that.
Yeah, it's not that at all.
Let's go change the password on his luggage.
You keep talking.
That's right.
I'm gonna look at something real quick.
So can you imagine how long it would take you to break an authentication into a system that you have to authenticate by just manually typing every kind of combination you could think of, right? We don't have that kind of time, right? So with these password attacks, rather than just sitting back and having to guess, they're kind of doing guesswork, but more than that, what they're doing here is they're automating the process, right? They help assist us in that process and automate it, and they can do it a lot faster than we ever could, even the slowest machines. Now, when we say speed, that's relative to the power that you have to throw at it and the type of attack you're doing. But generally speaking, what we're talking about is automating that process.
I can totally speak to that because there are times when I'm confronted with some sort of authentication system that I don't have an off-the-shelf, ready-made piece of programming to throw at it so that I can automate that process. And I'm going, can I automate this process? Because if I can, guessing is feasible, but man, it's not fun. It takes a lot of time. And I'm unlikely to be successful with that.
Sure.
Plus, I don't want to eat up all the time. I want to get to the end game as fast as I possibly can. So that's where automation does come into play a lot of times.
It helps at least get you in the front door, and then you can go from there for sure. So that's essentially what a password attack is. Now, there are different types, but that's essentially, on a broad level, what a password attack is, right? It's used against an authentication system. You're trying to gain some kind of privileged access, or maybe access so that you can pivot somewhere else and automate the process doing it.
All right. Well, this episode is labeled Password Attacks Types. So I assume there are a few types of password attacks that we need to be aware of when it comes to Security Plus. Where do we begin with that?
All right, let's start with the tried and true, oldie but goodie, brute force attack. Now keep in mind that a brute force attack is still a guessing type of attack. You're still going to try to guess, right? But what you do in this guessing attack is that you are going to try character by character every possible combination you can across that keyboard. And notice that we've got the Kingston lock here, right? Think about the Kingston lock. If I was going to try to brute force this Kingston lock, it could take me a little bit, right? I know it wouldn't take Dan that long, but we do 0000.
I've tried. It took me half an hour.
It did, yeah, and that's what I kind of figured as well, right? Then we modify that last digit to a 1, then that last digit to a 2, then a 3, and you can kind of see what the process is going on.
I see where you're going here,
right?
Yeah.
And then once we get up to 9, well, then maybe we move over a digit, right? And we keep going through every individual character, every possible combination, until we finally, hopefully, get it right.
It's just a systematized going through, like you said, every possible combination, ultimately one of those combinations has to be the correct one.
Sure.
Otherwise, it's not a lock. It's just a loop.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely.
It never comes apart. So that's the idea of brute forcing. We're just going to go through each one of those combinations until we hit the right one.
Yeah, and while it does automate the process, in fact, you and I were talking about this. You mentioned that, a brute force attack can take a long time. Just think about all the combinations, right, that you could potentially, and I'm not going to sit here and do the math. I'm horrible at math. I think 1 plus 1 equals peanut butter. But just think about that. So it is one of these attacks that could take a very, very long time, and that's why we want to kind of move into some of the other attack types as well.
Yeah, definitely one that I lean on hard is going to be the dictionary type of attack because it makes my life a whole lot easier, right?
Yes.
I'm not spending as much computational power against this type of attack as I would with something like a true brute force. Wes, tell us what we need to know about dictionary attacks.
Sure, it's a brute force type attack.
Well, there you go.
That's right. No. In all seriousness, you still are trying different combinations, but typically what you have is usually a large list, right? Yeah, say a dictionary list, right? A lot of a word list, a common password list, if you will, and then that's what's being checked, right? Instead of going character by character. So what it can do is it can speed up that process a little bit more, and that essentially is the dictionary attack. Is just taking that list, basically pulling that in and using that, attacking the password against that list.
Oh, yeah. And that's why it's a whole lot easier because it doesn't matter how secure your I'll get in there. Secure your passwords are.
That's right.
If they're in that list, it's going to get popped and you're going to get nailed. So try not to use any kind of password that might be found in a dictionary because it might be found in a dictionary.
That's right.
All right. So now let's move on to probably if you need demon speed, you're looking for fast password cracking. You're going to go rainbow tables at the end.
Most definitely, because now what we're talking about is trying to speed up the process a lot more. And let's just go ahead and talk about it, right? So what you end up having is you end up having these pre-computed chains, and essentially a lot of the calculation has been done ahead of time, and then these chains are essentially stored inside of what are known as tables, hence the term rainbow tables. And what it really does for us is it tries to reduce the time. So it's a time reduction, right, that we have to worry about. And not only time reduction, keep in mind that the table files themselves, they can require a lot of storage. So that is a very important thing to keep in mind. Now, Dan, I was just amazed when you said, when I say large files, give us an indication here. Like, I was just amazed at the size of some of these rainbow tables.
Oh, yeah. You can get rainbow tables that are 6, 7, 8, 9 terabytes.
With a big T.
With a T.
Yeah. Yeah.
Terabytes.
Yeah.
So bring a big drive if you're going to have
That's
that.
right.
But the more you have, obviously, the more likely it is that you're going to be able to find the right password. And
Sure.
because of the expediency of using those pre-calculated hashes instead of having to do it on the fly, man, you can really rip through this thing. So the more you have, the better off you are.
Definitely. And let's just take a second, and while we've talked about, most of these password attacks, just kind of compare and contrast, right? The brute force, right? It isn't going to take a lot of storage space.
Oh, no.
But it's going to take time, and it's going to take a lot of computation to try all of those different combinations. Now, I would say dictionary attack is going to be kind of midway, right? It's going to take it's going to take maybe less time than the brute force, but you're still going to have a word list that you're going to have to use, and you still have some computational power that's going to be needed behind
because
this one.
even large word lists usually only take up maybe a couple hundred megs, maybe a gig,
like inside of a user share word list, right? Inside of Linux and Kali, right? What would you say roughly that file is? We're just still talking megs, right? We're not talking terabytes.
There's quite a few word lists inside of the Kali Linux pen testing operating system.
Sure.
But the big one is RockU, which is, I think it runs like, actually I can tell you, I've got it up right here. How about we quit guessing? And I'll tell you, let's see, ls-ALH, or just LH, of user, let's see if I can type user share word lists for RockU. It is 134 megs.
comparative to a rainbow table, which we're talking are terabytes, that big T. Boy, that one really is the one that gets me.
Plural, terabytes.
Bytes, more than one.
You can get smaller ones. It's not the only game in town, but some of these lists get very, very large.
And now that scale goes, storage space goes up, computational requirements go down a little, greatly compared to the brute force
But if
attack.
this is your stock in trade, spending a couple of $100 on a really large drive so you can hold those tables might be well worth the investment.
All right, very good. Dan, there is one I will tell you that I kind of forgot to talk about.
Oh yeah, this was he was like, oh yeah, don't let me forget about that. So I'm not going to let him forget about it. I know he remembered, which is password spraying, very effective method for password attacking.
Most definitely. So if we go back to that idea of the Kingston lock, right? Remember that what we're doing was we're trying multiple combinations against a system, a single account, right? And in a spraying attack is where you're, like for instance, let's say taking a single password or trying against multiple accounts, right? SSO is one that I think where if I can try, you know, because most people today are using some kind of SSO account, but essentially it boils down to taking that single attack, right, and trying that again, or not single attack, excuse me, single password against a user database.
Yeah, so basically with password spraying, what you're going to do is you've got common passwords. You can go out and then look up what are the most common passwords. Give me the password top 10 list.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think that is number one as of today, right? And well, if I've got a list of good users, right, and I know this one works here, what's the chances that it might work for this person or that person? With a large enough sample size, those passwords will probably end up working on a few accounts and get you in.
And you know what I think about that when I think comparative back to like a brute force attack, typically you're going to have, you could potentially have, like let's say you're doing an online attack against a system, you might have a lockout threshold that you can hit, and you can hit really quickly and it's detectable. But if I'm doing one password against multiple accounts, chances are it's going to be a little bit less detectable, and I might not go through that same account lockout threshold.
Yeah, you're probably not going to hit the lockout thresholds unless the user is already like messing up their own password or whatever, has some sort of device with an old password in it and is auto trying to log. Those are the kind of things that can happen in the real world system, but for the most part, it is a really good way to fly below the radar as far as like evading lockouts.
If you want stealth.
Right, if I can get 6 passwords in before it gives me a lockout, well, I'll throw 5 of the most common at every account I can find, and none of them will get locked out, and I'll be good to go, and I'm probably going to find one.
Yeah, so just keep in mind, we're talking about one password against multiple accounts, and like Dan said, that some of the most common passwords we might try.
There you go. All right, well, there you go. Password attack types. You should now hopefully be familiar with those. We've got guessing, brute force dictionary, rainbow tables, and my personal favorite, spraying, because it sounds fun to say. That being said, we are done for this episode, but we have more to come in the Security Plus series. So be sure to join us then. Until then, have a great day.
Thank you for watching IT Pro TV.